Right there.
Test. Test, test. Test, test. Test, test, test.
I'm from Texas, so I was in Dallas before this, and then I was in San Antonio before that. And both cities are, in Dallas, we had a billion.
Test, test.
Thank you. Can definitely hear you. I'm trying to get everybody else. So just continue to talk. I'm doing a mic check.
Are recording us?
Not yet.
Are we gonna get a laptop today? Or a packet? Packet would be better.
Test, test.
Yeah, bring up my packet, please. I didn't print mine. Hey, you done? Good. We gotta get a laptop, Alan.
Okay, we're at 2:00.
You're up in the Alps.
We're in the twilight zone.
All right. So it's 2:03 now. And we will call to order a special meeting of the Measure B Oversight Board. Melissa, will you take the roll call, please?
Member Scholes,
Here.
Member Silva,
Here.
Member Sabatier,
Here.
Chair Colbrant,
Here.
and Member Almond is absent.
Great. Could we please stand for the pledge of allegiance? Kelsey, would you like to lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. And if we could all turn our phones to mute or vibrate or something like that, that'd be helpful. Okay, so first off, we have the approval of the minutes of our October 14th meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review those online, and are they entertain a motion for approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Bruno, second by Jim Trolls. What's all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sounds like we're approved. Any opposed? Nope. Great job, Melissa. The minutes are approved. Okay, next up, we have consideration of a letter for the road project and the financing package. So Alan and Kelsey, would you like to make your presentation?
Certainly. So do you want to give anything? Or want me to jump right in?
Hey, why don't you just jump in? I think, I don't know that I have much to add at the beginning here.
Okay, so we gave this presentation at council a couple weeks ago on the 17th. But we really wanted to bring it back to you all and discuss it. So I'll go through this. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me. We also will have time at the end of this presentation to kind of go more into discussion and questions. It gets very data heavy, so some of it I may just kind of keep a little bit lighter, but if you do have questions, okay, go ahead and bring it up. Okay, so what we're going to go over is our overview of strategy options for our measurement projects, our recommendations, which we already gave to council. We had a financial consultant who also gave some slides through here. They're not going to be joining us today, but I will give a quick overview of their slides as well. And then we can discuss a little bit of the projects as well. So right now, as you know, we're trying to focus on about 15 to 18 million worth of road projects from our Measure B projects. We're looking at trying to focus primarily on large projects and concentrated areas so that we can get the most bang for our buck and impact that way. Particularly areas that are high density of homes so that we can affect the most people. We're looking at public streets and a combination of chip seal, pole depth reclamation, and maintenance. And we're really trying to do projects that will transform the neighborhoods. Okay, so the benefits of our projects, and all part of the Measure B oversight, so you're very well aware of how beneficial these projects are. By doing this, we'd be adding paved roads over 2,000 residences. This would add investment interest for developers and potential new businesses. It'll help improve the overall reputation of the city. And it also provides better access to those businesses that are already here and increases safety. So there's two strategies that we've been looking at for completing our road projects using Measure B funds. One is the pay-as-you-go, which is what we've been doing up until now. And now we want to talk about doing debt financing as well for doing these projects. So both have pros and cons. The pay-go, we, based on our current amount of Measure B sales tax that's been coming in, we can do about an average of $1.5 million in projects per year, which means we have to do smaller projects and piecemeal larger projects. And right now, following that strategy, we'd have most of those projects completed over 13 to 15 years. It is harder to complete maintenance projects because we're constantly chasing the maintenance. We go with debt financing, we'd be looking at doing all of those projects in best case scenario about 1 year, worst case scenario, we're expecting about 3 years. We would be repaying the debt financing over 10 to 15 years, and we would use the Measure B resources to pay back that debt financing. Our current Measure B annual revenue is 2.5 million on average, and so we would be using about 1.5 million of that to pay back that debt service. So I made some assumptions while we put together this presentation and looked at some of these pieces. So we're stating, making the assumption that the project cost in today's dollars would be $15 million. And that we'd be paying back 1.5 million per year. And that we would be looking at a bond or debt financing project for 13 years. And that the bond rate would be about 2.75. Our financial advisors have put out an RFQ right now where they are trying to get back the actual rates that we're getting, but we believe it'll be around that.
You can double that inflation rate.
Yes, so that's it as well. I made an assumption of stating that there would be a 4% inflation rate. Right now, the inflation rate, the CPI, I think yesterday came out at 8.5. So obviously this would be significantly higher. We don't know what it will be over the next 13 years. We're going to assume at some point it's going to be going back down.
Are the municipal rates already going up?
They're already going up.
What has the progress been in the last year? I mean, I believe they were down at 1.5 or 1.75 now.
They were, and now we're looking at a potential of 2.7.
So a full point in a year.
Well, I mean, that also depends on, I mean, if we were to do a shorter term, you know, the rate's gonna be less.
Exactly.
You can, I mean, this isn't, what we're looking at isn't really a bond, it's still private financing. It's, you get a cheaper rate if you issue bonds, it's just more expensive to do the bond issuance. So we're calling these bonds, this wouldn't be a bond, just because the private financing rates are so low that it's not worth spending the extra money issuing a bond to get the lower rate. This makes more sense.
Why did you decide to scatter it out over 15 years, or is that optional to bring that down to?
Well, I think there's a lot of different options. This is kind of a range of options. And so if we let Kelsey go through some of the stuff,
Okay.
I think you'll get some of your questions answered, and then we can talk more about kind of options from there.
By the way, I've gone through this. Is very good. I mean, very informative. Some of the questions I had going through your answered as I went.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. And as we said, you know, this is still a discussion. We're still finalizing the rates, and before it had pointed out, there's a little bit of a range as well.
Just so you know, the council said that we don't know how much we'll be able to borrow yet until we get a rate locked in, but to focus on no more than 13 years and 1.5 million annual debt service pay. So we'll see.
Because that was still $1 million to do other projects as needed.
Yeah, and for, you know, maintaining staffing and some stuff like that. And
On the
we want to make sure it also doesn't extend. We can't issue debt, or we shouldn't issue debt that extends longer than the life of the projects, or of course, Measure B itself.
on the revenue side, excuse me, Joe. 2.5 million is the number you used in here. How consistent has that been?
Well, it keeps going up, and hopefully
That's a good thing. Yeah. I remember one time when it was disappointing, maybe 1.7 or 1.8, maybe.
well, Measure B itself, when it was initially put forward, the projections at that time were 1.7.
But we had that year, didn't we?
Well,
Was it the COVID year or? No?
well, what you're thinking of, I believe, is we were concerned about it, and that's what we budgeted, but the actual receipts actually come in much higher.
So it was a warning that didn't.
We're actually, this fiscal year, we'll probably have a little bit over 2.7.
Awesome. Thank you.
And how do we pay back the bonds? Am I getting too far
I
ahead?
think, yeah, let's try
Okay.
it. I mean, I understand the interest in all this stuff. but
Okay,
She has a really good presentation here. so
Okay.
probably better to just let her-
So using those assumptions, this is our cost comparison of pay-go versus finance. So using that
Oh.
interest rates, and then using potential inflation.
you're gonna pay back the bonds with Measure B money.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and because it speeds up production.
Exactly.
Okay,
So if we were to do the pay-go process, which is, you know, what we've been doing, and we looked at our current project cost, and we were completing this over the next 13 years, then the project cost completion with the estimated just 4% inflation would end up being almost 25 million. And if we go with financing, and this would be at the very top of our timeline with the financing of completing the amount of projects within 3 years, then with inflation, we'd be looking at just under 17 million. So you can see there's a significant savings there. So, and I tend to, I'm always looking at the dollars, like that's what I do. So that's why I want to bring this up. If we look at this in breaking it out even further, if we have our project costs today being 15 million, in 3 years with 4% inflation, like I said, it'd be just under 17 million. In 13 years with 4% inflation, which would be about the fastest we can see that we would finish all of those projects. If we do the pay-go process, then it would be just under 25 million. And if it took all 15 years, which is quite possible based on, you know, just the way that the structure would be, because we would be doing pay-as-you-go, then we'd be looking at about 27 million. So that would be worst case scenario. Yeah. Okay, so another way of just looking at this is the financing cost versus pay-go cost. So if we look at worst case scenario that we're projecting, and again, I don't have a crystal ball, so it's just trying here, of completing these projects in 3 years with 4% inflation and 2.75% interest, the overall cost would be 21 million. Best case scenario of the pay-go, looking at completing it in 13 years with the 4% inflation, which is a little bit low, would be 25 million. So even if we have our worst case scenario of our financing versus our best case scenario, both of these are projections, of course, of our pay-go, it's still a savings of about $4 million. Okay, so this part is cool, and I cannot take credit for this. City manager Laura did this one, but he did a projection of both our measure P and then if we had measure V, looking at fiscal year 2006, 2007, all the way to 2023, 24. And as you can see, even when we had the Great Recession, we didn't dip very much. And so we've had an increase of about just over 4% in our revenue pretty much the entire time period. Which, if we take an even slightly more conservative look at our potential revenue annual growth and have that be at about 4%, then as this is moving forward, and this is fiscal year 36, 37, so this is a projection, we would be looking at getting significantly over the 2.5 million that we have been getting so far in Measure B. So if you look down at the chart below where it says max proposed debt service, that would be our debt payment, and we would still be getting annual growth. Potentially, we would have the opportunity to both be paying back the debt service and with our increased revenue growth, being able to have additional projects on top of that. So we could do both pay-go and debt financing this way. The other piece, and I haven't jumped too much into this, luckily we have our public works director, if y'all have more questions about this here too. But just on maintenance assumptions, the average cost to maintain roads equals about 10% of the rehabilitation cost to rehabilitate the road. So if we can do optimal maintenance every 5 to 7 years, and by doing consistent maintenance, it increases the road life by 10 to 15 years. So won't go too much into this, but it kind of shows you at the bottom, if you look at reconstruction cost versus the maintenance cost and the various types of maintenance costs. that are above there. So by us being able to also have more funds potentially to maintain our roads, we'd be looking at extending our road life and safety as well. So some assumptions here as well, but if we are looking at 10% of the $15 million worth of costs, that would be about 1.5 million every 5 years based on our annual projection. That would be very easy for us to include those maintenance costs along with the financing. It'd be about 4.5 million total over 15 years. With no maintenance, the roads need to be rehabilitated every 15 years. So completion of the road projects quickly allows us to both have all the road projects in place and continue to maintain them, which would mean our investment would last longer. Okay, the other piece too, one of the other reasons that I am excited about it potentially looking at debt financing for these projects is staff time for putting out various projects. If we just do one construction project per year, the average bid takes about 30 days once it's out there. Contract negotiation process on a good time takes about 20 days. So typically just with staff time, we're looking at about 64 hours on average per solicitation and contract. If we can combine 13 contracts into one, and that's just doing one construction contract a year that we can now put into just one construction contract total, that is decreasing over 19 weeks of staff time, just under 2 years in contract delays. So it just is a much more efficient way to do these projects, because what we would like to look at is instead of having multiple projects over the next 13 years, we can do debt financing. We could have 1 or 2 contractors just knock out these projects quickly, which is very useful in other ways as well, because having just the one contract provides economy of scale. For the contractor, there's less mobilization costs. They can utilize bulk material pricing, and this becomes very attractive to larger construction companies, which means we have a better chance of more bidding, more competition, lower pricing. Okay. So one of the other things that we wanted to talk about too, and this is sort of a draft idea, but we would want to do something along those lines, are right now we've been getting great revenue. We think we're going to continue for a while, but should something happen that is unforeseen, another pandemic or something else, not, we want to have a little bit of a reserve in place in case it's needed in the future. So we're looking at something along the lines of where for the first year, we could hold 10% reserve. The next year we could hold about 7.5%, and the third year about 5%. Then we could have a reserve there for in case there's a recession that comes forward. If there's not, we would take it back. We would discuss, do we want to continue to hold this reserve? Do we want to increase the reserve? Where are we at that point? But it gives us that cushion.
This is a reserve just to make sure that if there's a recession, we don't have challenges meeting our debt thing, like we don't have to lay off our.
So this is a reserve of the $1 million we're not spending on debt service.
So it actually would probably be a reserve of the entire amount that comes in, but we're still discussing it. That's why it's a draft. So right now, for 10%, it would be, this is a perfect year, or next year, if we still get it a little bit over that 2.5 million, to just reserve around 200,000.
If we did this over a 3-year period, this would be more than enough to have covered any decreases that we saw in the Great Recession and sales tax revenue over that time.
In order to apply it to your debt service.
Yes,
Makes perfect sense.
Don't want to be upside down.
exactly.
Pardon me?
Don't want to be upside down.
No.
So were there any more questions on this slide? Okay. So because of the economic analysis and the financial analysis, we are recommending moving forward with financing. The risks are it does sacrifice our budgetary flexibility. However, and if there is the economic downturn, there's a potential loss in revenues, and we would still have to do the debt payments. However, by having our reserves and looking at the analysis, we feel like that's relatively low risks, especially when you compare it with our potential benefits, which are, we still have, even though it's increasing, which is why we're trying to do this quickly, we still have historically low borrowing costs. And this also allows us to hedge against inflation because we're locked in that borrowing cost, and that way we can actually use the inflation because our revenue should be going up a little bit, so that we're using it instead of chasing the inflation to our benefit. We also will know how much we're paying each year, so we know our budgetary costs, and we can go ahead and complete the significant projects now, which we didn't even go into the potential opportunity cost of not having the roads there, but that is something to consider as well. So if we do move forward, this is just our estimated timeline. We did take this to city council. We have put out an RFP. We're a little bit behind here now because we'd hoped to lock in interest rates, but that's not happening just yet. So now that should say April. And then if we're lucky, May or June, we would be going into the bond closing. We are still discussing selection of roads, and that's probably going to happen more in the next couple months. And then ideally, the end of this year, we might be able to start bidding out road projects. It might be beginning of next year. And then sometime 2023, city council would approve the construction. Okay, and then now we're going into NHA's advisors. But before I jump into that, should you guys have any questions? Do you want me to go back?
You know, I'm kind of thinking off the top of my head that first off with inflation, and this is all oil, gas products that are going through the roof. We lock it in, it's a good thing. And even, you know, inflation in the marketplace, everything's costing more at the store, which should be giving us actually even a bigger measure of the pot to deal with it. Until it gets so expensive, people can't afford to buy anything, right? But there's that potential downside, but I mean, I like the slide that says, you know, we're not chasing inflation, we're using it to our advantage. Because if we had 8.5% so far this year, you add in another 3 or 4% from last year, we're at 11% inflation over, you know, mostly the last 9 months, 7 to 9 months, really. Because most of the inflation last year.
No question about it. The three top reasons, you really did a nice job on this. Interest rates are going up. We know that. The roads aren't getting any better waiting. They require more work the longer you wait. We've discussed this before. And the inflation and construction costs, it's almost a no-brainer, but I know it takes a lot of work to put it all together, but I think this is good thinking, very good thinking.
I agree partially with all of this. I think the 4% is an easy, straight number to use. I think eventually it'll go back down to 2. I hope for 13 years we don't stay at 4%. That's horrible. I know we're much higher right now, but I'm hoping it dives within the next 2 or 3 years. We'll see. But I think people are going to spend more money on rent, and people are going to spend more money on food, and that's not taxable. So that's the one thing that I'm not sure how level Measure B will remain. But at the same time, this is to me the big one. You said the cost of construction is going to keep going up. That's for sure. So the cost being what it is today versus what it will be 10 years down the road, that's a huge advantage. But to me, what does the city gain from fixing so much so quick? New housing being installed now that you can build a house in front of a real road instead of a messed up road. The advantage of people saying, hey, you're not spending all your money on fixing cars. We can now bring disposable income retail here, so you can actually see the benefits more of sales tax from those things. I think that by not waiting 13 years to get to a point where investors say, I want to come into Lake County, we're already seeing that now. This is going to make it that much faster over the course of the next 3 years. I know you said 3 years is the worst case scenario. I hope that we can bring that down to a 1 to 2 rather than a 1 to 3. And I think you guys can do it because I'm seeing what you're doing right here with all the work that's happening on Lakeshore and everywhere else down at the Sulphur Fire area. But that's my only worry, is holding on to money. The longer we hold on to it, the more of a wasted money that is. So I'd love to see that 1 to 2 rather than 1 to 3. just to kind of put a fire, restrict you guys on that.
If I could address a couple of things you said. So if you went back to the chart that showed the measure P, measure V comparison, that was back like 13 years or something like that. And the average increase over that whole time was just over 4%. So,
And since you bring it up, and Kelsey said you made that, I do have to just criticize. It would be nice to have the years on the bottom instead of 1, 2, 3, 4.
So that's totally my fault too. We both.
I don't know, like, this is something we talked about because I literally could not get this chart in Excel to do that. If you look at the data, it has the
It has
fiscal
its
years.
own mind.
I don't
And
know.
then I
Like
spent
Kelsey, you gotta
another
help me and she
hour
couldn't figure
on
it out.
trying to fix that.
So,
And then I couldn't, so.
But no, it
But-
does help to see what
Yeah.
was the impact.
Because that was
of
the worry, like, when you compare it, and, your point about, rent, food, I mean, this is somewhat anecdotal, I can't really prove it, but in looking at our sales tax data here for a long time, I mean, a couple of things, there is still a lot of food products that are taxable, especially in an impoverished community, a lot of the residents that we have buy processed stuff, which is still taxable.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And it's actually kind of surprising to see how little of a dip that we had in the Great Recession, really. And I believe that that's one of the benefits of being supported in an impoverished community is literally the level of public assistance that flows through here in our spending is, you don't see as many highs, but you also don't see as many lows in a recessionary period.
Gonna be the same with growth.
The biggest hit would probably be property tax rather than sales tax. If there was something like that again that happened.
So,
But overall, I think no matter what, all that I said, the advantage is there. And let's show as much work as possible in the next few years. And I think that will be a catalyst to that much more coming into the community. So.
And I also think that if you want any chance at all of getting Measure V extended, you've got to show the people that you're doing something, that they've got to see something in their yard, on their streets that they travel. They don't care what's.
Whose idea was this?
well, I mean, it's been kind of talked about a little bit for a while. I mean,
Great idea.
Actually, we kind of, I should say, I had hoped to do this sooner, and, it's costing us a little bit because we didn't make it happen before that, or I didn't make it happen. We actually contracted with these guys to do an analysis on this right before COVID. We had the contract in place, we had initial discussions, and then got distracted, and we didn't come back to it until fairly recently. We're like, if we're gonna do this, we gotta do it now, or we're gonna miss.
I mean, the concept was brought up in our last meeting in October.
Okay. Secondly, I'd like to commend the city on the project on Mullen. It's beautiful. I live half a block from Mullen. And I drive it every day. I drive Mullen every day. And it's like, it doesn't feel like the city of Clear Lake. It's such a step up. What did that project cost?
I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, there were several different pieces to that project. I think the total contract was, what was it, like 2.3 million?
Okay.
But that was Mullen, some other stuff over in that area, and then
Okay.
also Acacia.
Has everybody have you seen Mullen? Have you seen it?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't it impressive?
Beautiful. New roads are always nice.
Okay.
So I don't know, maybe unless there's questions, we can skip through some of the other stuff. At some point, at least, I want to give you a little idea of kind of what we're thinking on projects. And see what you guys think.
Yeah,
I'm good with everything so far.
so this is NHA's analysis, and it kind of shows you some of the range. They did the same analysis, but they kind of did it the opposite way than I did. So this is another way you can kind of look at it. So if you have any questions, let us know. But this is sort of looking at the range right here, so if we, and how much we could potentially borrow and so forth, as well as looking at how much of a cost. we want to pay.
10, 12, 15.
So,
Who put the program together?
this particular part here,
Yeah, well, no, the whole program. Who put it together?
the whole program,
Yeah.
the presentation.
Yeah, the whole presentation.
I did,
Oh, nice
so,
work.
well,
Nice work.
thank you, it was a team effort, but, thank you, anyway, so then. this
What's your
is-
job?
I'm the finance director, I'm sorry. I
Oh,
should have
well,
introduced
okay.
myself.
Hello. I didn't know.
Yes, no, I apologize, I'm Kelsey Young, I'm the finance
Thank you.
director,
Well done.
thank you.
We talked about that just before you got here.
Oh, okay.
But I should have definitely introduced myself. So anyway, so I won't necessarily go over any of these slides unless you all have a question, because we can just go ahead and jump into. And then this is talking again, the reasons why you want to consider. Financing. And then this is talking about the maintenance again. But I will go ahead and stop sharing unless you have any questions, and then we can talk about projects themselves. Right.
What's our, it was 16 when it passed, so we're on the 6th year.
Yes.
I think this is year 5 of this committee.
So
That's
it
why,
passed in 16, it
Yeah, I
started
think-
in 17 to collect like in the middle of 17 is when it started coming in.
that's why I think we're looking at 13 years, because we don't want
Right.
things. to go
So
bad.
that'll
we
leave us
have-
2 years after
yeah.
the fact.
I think I'm the only one that goes back to the beginning.
And we could go as far as 15 years, but we talked about doing 13 years, so there could be a little bit.
This was discussed at length in a couple of the earlier meetings. I think Alan might have brought it up. I'm not sure. Or maybe it was Doug.
Well, I mean, I know I did, but I think it was brought up before.
Yeah, no, Greg and Doug, we talked about it with Chris right now, when we first started.
But you just have to remember who actually gets it done.
Yeah. The council.
Kelsey, right?
Okay, so quick on this, this is just to give you some context. So the green lines are public and considered to be paved streets. The yellow are public and unpaved streets. And then all the red areas are actually still private streets. So something that at this point we wouldn't obviously be spending. We don't have a real detailed thing on what we've done. You know, a lot of the, like the mole and stuff, you know, there's been a lot of things in here and in this area down here, of course. With the chip seal stuff in the avenues, a big chunk of this was done. Dale is, and the crew is working on finalizing the plan for this year's chip seal project, which we're hoping to get another 10 miles, which is twice as much of what we did last year. So they'll be finishing up most of the stuff in the avenues, I think is the current plan. And then this section over here, which is, this is just north of West 40th, north of the Hilltop building. So the plan is to focus kind of on those two areas. There isn't any other spots, or are we doing anything over here yet?
So we'll be doing some of this area as well.
Okay.
Uh,
Oh, that's like north of the airport.
Yeah, like
property.
Vallejo and
Yeah.
stuff like
Yeah.
that.
That's correct. And up here we'll be going north of 40th and west of Phillips. We may go in and reach chip seal the first year project, the 1 mile that we did. We're gonna go and take a look at that.
Okay.
And then we're gonna go further south. We're gonna go,
Further
west of.
Boils.
Yeah, so quite a bit more out here in those areas, including, so what is this called, that runs right behind?
West 40th.
Yeah, West 40th, so we're gonna go West 40th all the way down, and Clearwater Davis is paved, but everything through here except for, I think, one road,
That chip seal.
with chip seal.
Have you come up with a cost per mile on chip seal?
You know, the first mile we did cost a little over about 120.
Yeah.
And the next 5 miles cost 360 or something like that.
Well, when you include the grading, and the last meeting, I kind of thought that through, and $100,000 a mile seems to be graded and chip sealed.
That's probably pretty
Yeah,
accurate.
that's why I'm asking.
And-
It was $350 for the chip seal, and then, you didn't break down your crew time or equipment time.
We can track that a little better. let you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, I, for your own knowledge,
Sure.
when you go out to bid or for budgeting.
We're already working on the
Yeah.
grading at this point in these
But,
areas.
you know,
Yeah,
the lesson we believe is the more we do, the cheaper per mile it is,
Exactly.
especially when it's in the same area. So that's why we keep taking bigger bites.
yeah.
So I'll switch gears a little bit. Now, this blue stuff is kind of concentrated areas that need a lot of work. So this section in the avenues is what we did last year. You can see this was an analysis based on not every street, but ones that had a fairly high concentration of homes on them that needed work. So based on what Dale's saying, we can assume that pretty much all of this and this will be complete before we need to use any of the financing money. So the other sections that we're planning on focusing on, so this is just south of Redbud Park. There's some pretty nasty stuff down here in this area. We've talked, well, it was a lot since before I was even here, about how the tree streets need work, but no one knows what to do. And I like, well, at some point we got to figure out what to do, and we got to do something. So it sounds like there's some ideas here, but we're thinking of just knocking out that whole section,
Wow.
all the tree streets.
Wow.
And then,
If I may, I know from the experience of what Ray had told us about what people had installed on the culvert or on the gutter area that made the water go into the road and kind of mess up the road. In the tree streets, people plugged up the culverts that the water is supposed to go through rather than putting something over the culvert to drive into their driveway. So a lot of times you'll see there's water that can move and then it's stuck. And then and so I think that maybe looking at those types of things, because the flooding there is pretty bad.
yeah, I mean, I don't know, Dale and Dave say that it shouldn't be, it's going to take some significant drainage work to figure it out, but it's doable. And so, but we don't,
It was good at one time.
that's not something, an area that we can really do chip seal on. We're going to have to do.
I think it's worth mentioning, when I first came here back in the, further back than I care to talk about, back in the early 70s, all those roads, those tree streets across from where the drive-in used to be, the post office, and all, they're all paved. They're all asphalt paved. Now there's nothing left. So I know there's
a few chunks that make it even worse, probably.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
actually trying to.
Are you thinking about chip sealing those? Or
No.
are you gonna?
No, I don't think we should sell
You
those.
could lose a car on Cypress. You gotta go in someone's yard to go around the bomb that blew
Just
up.
overlay?
There's gonna have to be a lot of drainage work done before we can do anything there. And
Wow.
it's just really flat. That's the problem there. Up where we've been doing the chip sealing, the roads aren't nearly as flat.
Yeah.
A lot.
I came here on the sewer job where they put the sewers in that area, and the roads were kind of bad then. And the county actually did a good deal with the contractor I was working for. Instead of trying to patch pave and piecemeal back what they dug out, they just paid them to overlay the whole thing. And added money to the asphalt. It saved time preparing ditch trenches rather than just overlaying it. So that was there when in the early 70s. I know that. Now it's almost gone.
The lower this grouping. Does this include Liddell?
No, that's behind Thrifties.
So
and-
Did I got the wrong area?
This is over behind Foods in the Hilltop building.
Yeah.
I live on Liddell.
Show them where Foods, et cetera is.
Yeah,
You
Foods is
see
right
there,
here.
right there.
I moved here in 1980, and Liddell, my street, was one of the nicest streets in the city. And it's in terrible shape right now.
I believe it's a
But anyway, the fire department and used to use Liddell because it's the main cut through. It's Walnut, Liddell, Mullen is the quickest cut through from Olympic to Lakeshore. And the fire department used to use it. And the road got so bad, they quit using it. But it's a significant road, is the point I'm making.
Yeah, well,
I know, we got a lot of bad roads.
good try, Jim.
Okay.
Good try. I mean, obviously, we've done quite a bit of stuff in this area. There's plenty of other roads in this area that need upgrade. I mean,
Sure.
it's a mishmash of public and private. You can see here that there's quite a mix of private stuff in there. But the whole point, going back to, we have to be somewhat relentless on, I think, is if we're gonna do this and maximize the impact, we need to group projects together as much as we can. And so that's why we're thinking this area, like doing most all of Clear Lake Park. And then that doesn't mean these other streets are gonna get abandoned for the next 13 years, but as we grow our revenue over the next few years, we believe that we'll still have enough revenue to go back to doing the pay-as-you-go thing on some of these smaller projects throughout the area. I mean, obviously, we also don't want to be in a situation, you're talking about renewing Measure V, that we go spend this
Well,
money.
that makes sense.
We do great projects, and then from years 4 through 15, we don't do any projects because we don't have any money because we're spending all in debt service. We don't want that either, right? So.
But grouping makes sense also, yes.
And so, we think that up here, I mean, if you drive through Clay Park, it's kind of an odd mix of, there's some great streets still, and there's some horrendous streets.
I went out there to a garage sale and I was like, oh my God, how do I get out of here?
Yeah. So if we did this, I mean, it would be kind of a mix of probably chip seal, FDR, depending on how it's laid out. But between those three areas, primarily, we would be looking at about 20 miles. And we think that we should be able to do that with the financing.
You do have a point though, Jim. When I was in the fire department, volunteer, when we were coming out of there to somewhere in the Emory area or something, that's where we went. That road is where we went because it was the only one you could go on.
Sure.
So
Quick question about the park. Was it, because I believe there's an HOA out there, is that correct?
we don't have any.
What
official-
pays for that swimming pool out there? Because it's kind of a public swimming pool.
That I'm not sure.
I thought it was something kind of like the Highland Springs, where you're kind of part of a, not an HOA, but I guess it's an HOA of sorts.
Community association. So
Yeah, because I thought that's how they paved their roads in the first place out there. I was just curious, are we kind of layering on top of something else that we need to maybe communicate with?
Well, these are all public.
Yeah.
So.
That was an assessment
What,
district.
did
I
they
believe,
assess
yeah.
themselves?
They
Gotcha.
did. I think the county arranged that and they did that prior to.
The county used to do that type of thing. I don't know that you've done it for a while, but even like Riviera, I think was maybe the last one that was done. There's a few things.
We have contracts with them to keep paying us so we can redo their roads, but those are the nicer areas because their roads keep getting redone.
Are we kind of sticking with the plan that we've been looking at?
You mean the measurement?
The schedule of
Yeah,
project?
kind of. I mean, we think that by doing big groups in big areas, I mean, there is some diversion from the plan, but in kind of circling back to the pay-as-you-go stuff, we would fall back to the.
I absolutely agree. Driving up through the 5 mile project, been around a long time. I was pleasantly surprised at how much better it was. Now, we haven't gone through a real tough winter. We haven't had any winter since that was done. We'll see how it holds up, but it was a remarkable transformation. The people up there must be thrilled.
Yeah, I mean, as thrilled as people ever are with what we do, but Well, that's what we got. We're hoping that you'll consider this draft letter support so that the council knows that you're behind the.
Boy, you're
plan
quick.
and-
You got this done already?
I've already signed it.
So currently, we're supposed to be getting bids back on the financing, as Kelsey mentioned, I think on Monday, right? Is when those are due. And we'll be putting the details together and then bringing this back to the council for their final approval of the bond documents on next Thursday.
Super.
And so we would like to hopefully include this letter of support with all that information to the council.
Give everybody a minute to read it.
Yeah, I don't, the particulars in here, I don't know all of the details that the council has to consider before they amend the Measure V.
Oh,
No, I'm glad you brought that up. The bond council reviewed the stuff, and if you look, it's pretty plain language in the expenditure plan is like an attachment or an exhibit to the ordinance. And it has language right there in the bottom that says the city council can make changes to it. And so that's what they're recommending, that they officially do that. Because it doesn't preclude paying for interest, but it doesn't say you can't either. So they want us just to put it in there.
I myself, I'm ready to make a motion. I can't see any downside considering the things we're facing. Inflation, interest rates going up, construction costs going through the roof. I think it's a smart move, and I'm ready to make a motion if that's what you want. As far as the details of the letter, I think these are going to be the council's. Maybe you'd be more familiar with the verbiage in here. I think the council is going to make a decision like they will on everything, what they want to do.
Well, this is our letter to the council.
Right, right, but it's pretty specific about what's going to happen, and I think that.
Well, it's just what we're requesting.
Yeah.
We're giving our opinion on what we're requesting, so.
Yeah,
So generally speaking, the idea of the letter is that you support the idea and that you support the official amendment to the expenditure plan. So those are really the two things.
I get it. And so do you need two motions or do we need to talk about this some more? I'm ready.
Is there any more discussion?
I'm ready.
My last thing, and I said it during the public comment for the city council meeting, is I hope that we can leverage this amount of money with the infrastructure bill that will provide you some funding for roads as well. That would be an amazing ability.
As you brought that up, that's came up a few times. I just want to try to address that. We're still not sure how much money we're going to be able to get out of the infrastructure bill because it's focused on more regional projects. But I would say that even though it's not precluded specifically in Measure V, when it was sold to the public, it was kind of sold, as I understand it, being focused on residential streets. And so the committee's input and the city council's input have been to, use the money largely on residential streets. And so I think the flip side of that is, we're still going to have to put upgrades in the Lakeshore Drive and some of these other places, right? We actually have a grant identified to do the rest of Lakeshore Drive, hopefully. But I think those are the type of projects, those more collectors and arterials that we probably wouldn't use Measure V funds on anyway, that would be eligible either for other grants through state or the infrastructure bill.
Okay, if there's no more discussion, the chair will entertain a motion.
Go.
Do you need two, Alan, or just one?
No, just, I guess a motion.
A motion that
offering the letter of support.
Approving the letter.
that we approve that Chairman Goldbrandt signed the letter on our behalf.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
All right.
That's
Oh.
unanimous. Do we need a
Probably-
roll call?
Well, no, I was just saying.
Oh, do we have any
There's
public
no
comment?
public, I don't think, but we need to make sure. we ask.
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
No public members in the council chamber.
No public members in the council chambers.
Well, should we take the motion? Ratify our motion? So we'll just say your motion again, just for the record to make sure.
Okay, I make a motion that we authorize Chairman Cole Brandt to sign a letter on our behalf supporting financing of the road projects.
Second.
Bruno seconds, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passed unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Leave that pretty one back and I'll sign it and give it to Melissa.
Pretty one?
Yeah.
You gonna let me keep the rest of this?
Yeah, you can have that.
Give me a copy of
Motion
the
to
letter.
adjourn?
Oh, yes, we can.
I think he can just.
That's the conclusion of our agenda, so we'll adjourn the meeting at 2:57?
No.
No,
2:52.
2:52. Okay, all good.
I'm in. Mr. Ritter.
Nice job, by the way.